Since my parts are all clean and I'm still waiting on the engine, I'm going to clean up the shop some and start painting parts. I'm going to start by getting everything out of here that's not necessary. Clean off the benches and put the tools away. Never throw away a Dremel bit, even if it's worn out. Might need that sometime. I have a pile of old parts here which I'm not going to reuse, but I don't want to part with. Old generator hoses till I get the new ones and know what the correct length is. Temperature gauge, the old idler gear that was loose, old oil seals, more hoses, bad bearing from the steering shaft, pipe clamps, old spark plugs, radiator pads, old fuel line that's been patched up, coil mount. This plate, which I never figured out what it was, sat behind the radiator. Fan belts, make sure the new ones are the right size, keep the old ones. Old gasket that I got to match. Magneto. Put all this stuff upstairs in the other side of the garage. What I'm going to do is set my finished painted parts on here after they're painted. Sweep the floor. Anything I don't want paint overspray on, I cover with plastic sheeting. Or old sheets, and I concentrate the places I screen to where I might shoot paint right onto something. Paint that's floating around the air, it's going to float around the air and get on stuff. That's why my shop is tinged red. Oh, here's a spray gun, going to need that. Now regarding the compressor's in the heated part of my shop, of course, because I want warm air to spray. It's not ideal. There's a lot of things about my shop that aren't ideal. The filter on it will clog up and I'll have to change it after I'm done spraying this tractor. But it's the only way I can think of to keep the air warm. All the hoses in here as well. I used to keep the compressor out in the cold side of the garage, and the cold air spraying through the paint was terrible, so it's got to be in here for this. Check out and see how my old paint gun is. This is an Ingersoll Rand HVLP. High volume, low pressure? Yeah, HVLP. I sprayed a lot with this gun, but it's never let me down. Take it apart and see if it needs cleaning. Yeah, she needs some cleaning. Drop these into soak-in lacquer thinner. That takes everything off of them. Usually I clean up my gun better than this when I'm done. Clean gun is a happy gun, makes a happy painter. Thank goodness for lacquer thinner. Alright, we got her all cleaned up. Put her back together. Put the can on. I have everything ready and I can start hanging parts now. The question is, which parts am I going to start with? I guess I have to figure that out. This is a good candidate. Here's the forest of parts that I wind up with when I hang them. This is actually kind of a small batch because I just want to see how everything goes for the first batch. And here's my rationale for what to hang and paint separately versus what to paint when the engine's together, because I wait to paint the engine itself till after I've put it together. So things like the oil pan, the valve cover, I can paint them after I put them on the engine. In fact, it's better because that way I can paint all the bolts in place. I don't have to worry about painting the bolts separately. And the gaskets will get painted, and it just looks a lot cleaner if you paint the engine after it's back together. Things that go on the engine, like here's the intake manifold, they need to be painted separately because I can't get into all these recesses when it's on the engine. So the things that I've hung up, ow, are things that go on that I can't paint very well when they're already on. It's better to paint them when they're off. So the next step, once I get everything hung up, is I use this wash solvent that I got along with the paint, and I put it in a cup and I wipe down the parts with it to get any oil residue off of them. Now I'm always amazed how much dirt and oil comes off with this stuff. This stuff is about the same as lacquer thinner, so it takes it off and then it evaporates real quickly. And I just keep wiping it till I get a clean cloth. All that oil off there so the paint sticks well. Next step is to mask off what I don't want painted, and typically those are gasket mating surfaces, holes that go to the inside of the engine, etc., etc. So mask those off with masking tape and then trim around the masking tape to get it to the right profile. And for this bottom end, there's a piece of hose that goes on here that connects it to the air cleaner. So we can just mask off the end. Then this little pipe, I can just stuff a piece of shop towel in it to keep the paint from getting in there. And this is the oil fill that goes on the side of the engine. There's a gasket that goes here. We don't want any paint there, so mask that off as well. The parts are all ready to paint, so we can start mixing primer. But before I do that, I just want to go over this whole setup. I turned down the heat yesterday and warmed up the shop real good and left the heat on through today to warm this metal up. So the metal's good and warm. That's the big thing about painting. You want the substrate to be warm enough to take paint, and usually that's at least 50 degrees in my book anyway. Now this is not a paint booth. Of course, it's a home shop, and I don't have the luxury of all of the ventilation systems that, say, a professional body shop would have. So here's what I do. I've got the parts pre-warmed so that they'll take paint well. I open up the garage door partway, I open up the window partway, so I do have some fresh air coming in. I put on a mask, I put Vaseline on the mask to make a nice tight seal with my face. I put new filters on the mask, and I paint inside like that. It's about 30 degrees outside, so I don't have the luxury of painting outside or throwing open all the shop doors and windows. After I'm done painting, I clean up my stuff and I leave to let it dry. I close up the windows, I turn on the heat to warm it back up, and then I come back with the next coat. I know it's not optimal. I know all those safety experts who are out there are going to say this is the wrong way to do it. It's the way I do it. It's my home shop. I do things the way that I want to do. If you're working in your shop, you can certainly do differently. I don't have any ill effects afterwards. I don't have headaches. I don't have any sickness to speak of. I might grow a third eye when I'm about 80, but beyond that, it seems to have worked all right for me. I have a specific process I use for how I keep things clean and dry, and so we'll go ahead and mix this up. Usually I'd have a mask on right now, but I want to talk to you all about this. So this primer goes on at a rate of 8 to 4. 8 primer, 4 reducer. I don't know why they say 8 to 4. It's 2 to 1. 2 parts primer, 1 part reducer. What I'm using here, this is epoxy primer, Napa Martin Senior. It dries fast, and this is my solvent bucket. So whenever I use solvent, I put it in here after I use it, and then the solids settle to the bottom, and I can skim the clear stuff off the top and use it over again. We got that all ready. Now we can mix this paint up. Let's see that one. So this is a paint cup, and I know this is really basic, but some people might have not have done this before. These are various ratios around here of things. Usually, a lot of them are paint to reducer to hardener. And whatever ratio you're using, you can use the corresponding chart. But I stick to the ounces gauge here, so I know if I'm going 2 to 1, and I'm guessing I'm gonna need 10 ounces of primer and 5 ounces of reducer. So start with 10, then bring it to 15. And I use this dipper because it makes a lot less mess than trying to pour the paint can in. Yeah, I know there are alternate methods to do this. This is just the way that I've found that I like to do it. Now I can pour in 5 ounces of reducer. So this dipper that I use, after I'm done with it, goes into the solvent bucket and just sits there until I'm ready to use it again. We'll stir this up. And yes, I reuse paint sticks because I'm a thrifty sucker. I think I've mentioned that before. Now we can load the spray gun, and I always use a paint strainer. Always, always. Especially when you're doing multiple batches out of the same can, you have a tendency to get lumps in the paint after a while. These, of course, are one use. Even though I'm a thrifty sucker, I can't figure out a way to reuse these, so they go in the garbage after they get used. And then what I do is I take my solvent cup and I fill up the paint cup and leave that there so I can wash out the paint cup when I go to spray paint next. I'm going to put new filters on the mask. Coat the mask with Vaseline to make a good seal. It's messy, but it sure does keep the mask leak proof. After I spray the primer, I just run 3 consecutive half cupfuls or whatever through this of the thinner and spray it. And spray it out to clean it out. I put a cup in here and leave it sitting in there. I set the spray nozzle in some solvent and let it sit in there. Primer dries really quickly, so about the time you're done with primer, you can start mixing paint. Oh, purple. I didn't ask for purple. Oh, man. Oh, I see some red. Alright, let's mix up the paint. My mixing cup here. I gotta clean this out. This paint is Martin Senor acrylic enamel paint, and the mixing ratio for it is 8 parts paint, 4 parts reducer, and I'm using hardener, so 1 part hardener. So I'm going to go with the straight 8 to 4 to 1 and pray that I have enough. So 8 ounces paint and 4 parts reducer. So 8 ounces, 4 ounces of reducer. Brings it up to 12 ounces. And I'm mixing up enough here to spray 2 coats, because once I finish the first coat, I can turn around and spray the second coat right on it. And then 1 ounce of hardener. The same deal, through a strainer into the can. Clean off the mask. One thing about using hardener is your paint has pot life when you put a hardener in it. In this case, it's an amazing 8-hour pot life, which really surprised me. But you can't dump paint back in the can when you're done, because once the hardener's in it, it's going to harden. So doing small batch painting like this can be kind of wasteful, because you have to guess at how much paint you're going to need, and then anything you got left over when you finish the batch, you can't use. So I try to be as accurate as I can, but it's really just a guessing game. I got to recoat this with Vaseline. Well, that's it. Prime and 2 coats. This paint's great because it dries so fast you can throw it right on. I started painting at around 2. It's 4:30 now and I'm all done. So I carry the light around with me because my shop's pretty well lit, but you still can't see on the underside very well. So I just carry that portable light. Thank goodness for LED flashlights. Now it becomes just an assembly line. I can take these parts down tomorrow. I can put them on the shelf and I can hang up a new set of parts and just keep going through. It won't take long to paint these parts at that kind of speed, 1 set a day. So I'll just keep plugging along. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a great day.